All right, good afternoon. We're going to call our Alachua County Citizens Climate Advisory Committee meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that our attendance today. Steve, would you let us know who's here?
Sure, we've got Don, James, Jennison, Terry, and Adam. Any other members? No. That's 5. That's enough for a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. So we do have a quorum. Therefore, we will go ahead and approve our agenda. I ask for approval. Is there a motion? So
I move to approve the agenda.
is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any objection? Abstentions? All right, so our agenda for today, March the 20th, 2023 has been approved. And thank you, Steve, for putting that together. All right, we're going to, next item is the review and approval of our last meeting minute notes. And that was from our February the 20th, 2023 meeting. I asked for a motion for approval.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second discussion. All right, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? All right, so we've been able to approve our meeting minutes for February the 20th. Next item on the agenda is a discussion with from Gus at the from the county waste options that we have, and that's a continuation from our landfill discussion that we had on our February 20th meeting. So welcome, Gus.
Good afternoon, everybody. Gus Olmos, Solid Waste Director. Thanks for having me back. So what I got here is a shorter version of the presentation that I gave you guys a month ago. Feel free to stop me if you want more detail or if you have any questions from last month. I actually have a couple of slides with new information since then. So, just a quick reminder. So what I'm talking about today is the county is looking at some potential ways to divert waste from our landfills. As you know, we don't have a landfill in Alachua County. We take a lot of waste to the New River landfill. In order to do that, the county spent resources to build an industrial park behind the Levita Baron transfer station. That's what we call the Eco Loop. It's 31 acres, shovel ready, and we're looking for companies that can help us reduce the amount of waste we take to the landfill. We got one potential tenant already, and they're going to be located on this corner here. There are construction and demolition debris material recovery facility, and they're going to be taking about 10 acres on the top. So we still have 21 acres that we need to lease out, and we're looking for private companies to lease the property. We're not looking at investing county resources to build anything at this point. So among the many different things all these companies have to comply is they have to comply with the county's comprehensive plan. And we got this policy. Oh, yeah, okay. So we got a policy that deals with solid waste and its relation to waste to energy and what can we do with that kind of waste. When we did the first request of proposals, there were a handful of companies that didn't meet this threshold and were rejected. So when we went to the board, actually to 2 other advisory groups, the Economic Development Advisory Committee and the Environmental Protection Advisory Committee, they recommended that the board take another look at this policy, see if we wanted to change anything, see if we wanted to give this type of companies an opportunity to locate at the Eco Loop. So that's essentially the point of this whole thing. What, if anything, we do with this policy. So, like I said before, I mean, the policy is there for a reason. There are some legitimate concerns with waste to energy facilities. And that's a partial list of them. The thing to remember is that not all waste to energy facilities are the same. They come in different shapes, flavors, and potential issues. And last month, we kind of went through the different options that we have in the county. First and foremost, the county does have an adopted zero waste plan that focuses on reduction, reuse, and recycling. So that's still there. That's our first line of defense. That's not changing. But there are other alternatives. We're gonna have the typical classical solid waste incinerator where you take waste, generate steam, create electricity. That's the kind of facility that the county very much is against. It's very clear in the policy that that's not something the county wants to locate at the eco loop. But then we get into the other things that, they're kind of on the fence. Biological processing, anaerobic digestions or aerobic digestion, that meets the language. So they don't have to do anything. They already meet the current comprehensive plan language, but technology like chemical recycling or refuse-derived fuel, those are the ones that do not, especially if you take a very conservative reading of the policy, which is what I did. I took the most conservative approach I could, and we went with that. So I was here last month, and in time since I went to the Economic Development Advisory Committee and to the Environmental Protection Advisory Committee, basically gave them the same presentation that I gave you guys last month. My goal is to go to the Board of County Commissioners on May 2nd and provide them with some recommendations. Like I mentioned last month, I was looking at that point at three potential options. One is, just don't change anything. We got a policy, we like the way it works, we like the way you guys interpret it, we're good, don't change anything. The second one is, well, maybe you took too conservative on an interpretation of the policy. Maybe that's not what we meant to say when we wrote that policy. So let's talk about how it's being interpreted. And the third one is, now we really want to look at this policy and change the language and do something different. Those were the three options. Just to let you know, both the Environmental Protection and the Economic Development Committees recommended option 3. So they passed motions recommending to the board that they look at policy 1.2.5, missing a point there, and look at expanding it to allow other potential alternatives be allowed in the eco. In addition to that, they didn't write the policy for me, unfortunately, but they gave me some guidance of what to do. One of the things they suggested was, instead of saying what is not allowed, why don't you come up with some performance standards? You got a list of potential issues, why don't you put some numbers next to it? And regardless of what it is, if you meet that number, then you're in. If you don't meet that number, you're not in, which kind of makes a lot of sense until you start looking at the list. For example, the first one is pretty simple, it's just simple math. But when you get to the second bullet, the EPA has hundreds of people looking at air emissions. There is no way that I'm going to be able to duplicate that at the county level. It's just impossible. And if you move down the list, it becomes more and more and more nebulous. So even though the idea of having performance standards makes a lot of sense, it's just not practical or feasible. The other suggestion is, well,
Gus, can I
sure.
interject? Go back to that slide real quick. Oh, sorry. The last option, the last bullet point saying it's not compatible with the
Mhm.
circular economy,
It all depends who you talk to.
performance standards aren't? Is that,
No. These are the issues, the potential issues for.
okay. Right,
Yeah, these
for
are
the
potential
options, not
issues
for,
with.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, I thought
Yeah.
I was reading it as, thank you.
And with the first one, are they saying that they want to be able to produce more energy than they're putting into the system in the first place?
No, they're saying that some type of waste to energy facilities
Yeah.
I see, yeah.
expend more energy than they produce. So this, if you remember a couple of slides back, these are the potential issues with waste to energy, and that's why that policy is in place.
They're not the standards, they're more issues, right?
Yeah.
Problems
Yeah.
with the standard.
Yeah.
Right. So
The problems with actually implementing. the
Right, so
standard.
you thought is. one of the-
Physics in most of these cases.
Right, I mean, it was
Yes,
kind of.
Yeah, the issue was, put a number
right.
to each one of these, and then if they meet that number, then they're good to go. Well, it's very hard to put a number to this thing.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay,
Gus, I'm sorry to slow you down, I'm sorry, but
Sure.
it just occurred to me, I was gonna hold this to the end. Maybe at the
Wait,
end.
let's
Okay,
do
so-
that.
so here's
Let's
the-
do
okay.
that.
Okay, we'll do that at the
Yeah.
end, very
this is
good,
the
go ahead.
last slide.
Okay,
We're
very
ready.
good. Here we go.
So the other suggestion was, okay, you can't put performance standards, then why don't you come up with a policy that tells what are your preferences?
Mhm.
What are you like to do most? And luckily, there are such things as this called, these pyramids. The EPA has one, the European Union has one, Zero Waste International also has one. And, the terminology varies a little, but they're pretty similar. I mean, basically at the top, you want to do reduce, reuse. Next to it, you want to recycle. And then when you get to the last two pies, that's where it flips.
Mhm.
EPA and the European Union would like to get some recovery or waste to energy or something like that, and then go to disposal in a landfill. Zero Waste Gainesville is the opposite. They prefer landfill, and then any kind of energy recovery is just not acceptable in their view. So these are the top, and there may be others, but they're all pretty much the same as far as what they're looking for. So that's what I got from those advisory groups, Look at that policy, see how you can change it to kind of open up the tent. Maybe come up with performance standards, or maybe kind of look at this kind of hierarchy to tell the county and tell the potential tenants, this is what we really want to do, or these are our preferences.
Brent and Terry, we're gonna let you, but just to kind of sum up what we were talking about in our last meeting, it seemed like the issue was how much plastic, what we would allow, and whether or not we were gonna allow plastic or not.
So. Okay, so here's the policy. So the first sentence is pretty much self-explanatory. There's no argument here. It's the second one where you get to this point of the use of plastic tires or plastic derived materials as a fuel source or as feedstock for a waste to energy. Chemical recycling, basically one of the things they do is they take plastic and make fuel out of it. They make a diesel type of fuel out of it. So in my view, that clashes with this policy. Refuse derived fuel, basically they take combustible material. Some of them are able to extract a significant amount of the plastic out of it, but not 100%. So you take this combustible material, you make pellets, and that's the fuel that's going to be used for somebody. The difference is like your typical waste to energy plant, it's an electrical plant, and you're making electricity. With this chemical recycling or refuse derived fuel options, you could be making something else. For example, the cement plant in Newberry, they currently use refuse derived fuel that is being processed from somebody else's garbage. Not the county's garbage, because we got this policy in place, so we're not allowed to do it.
And the technology was in place to basically remove everything but 10% of the plastic.
I haven't gotten a proposal to that degree of specificity, but the first one we got, they said they couldn't do it. The second one, verbally, they told me we can do a lot better, but I don't have any specifics.
Yeah, sorry.
Right.
From our, we've talked to, not waste to energy, but really, well, some waste to energy, but they can pull out the bulk, the majority of the plastic. So
Yeah.
you're talking less than 10%. In that case.
And we're talking to the same company, by the way. So,
Terry?
Well, you've already addressed, I guess, the question that I was trying to formulate in my head. I was trying to get a sense of what were the quantitative basis, what is the quantitative basis for their suggesting that you broaden the guidelines, in the sense that I was trying to figure out what they were specifically asking, these other two groups that you went to, right? What were they specifically asking? We should allow this to go in to the waste
So-
stream.
basically, nobody liked number two, because they felt it was kind of like an incomplete solution. Yeah. So you either leave it the way it is, or you change the policy. So number two was quickly out of the running, and it's likely going to be out of the running when I get in front of the ball. I'm going to take that one out. So it's going to be down to 1 or 2. So they're looking at what we're currently sending to New River, that's a landfill, 850 tons per day. With a lot of stuff that could be chemically recycled, or it could be made into refuse-derived fuel. And they want to reduce that number,
They want to reduce the 800 and something. Did you say 850?
850 tons a day
They want to reduce the 850 tons.
to, I mean,
And,
based on what we gotten, we could get like a 60% reduction, if not bigger.
and we're trying to determine what is the tolerable level of contaminants that we're introducing. And it's the wrong word, contaminants. What's the tolerable level of bad stuff that ideally we would not like to be released into the atmosphere, into the.
Not necessarily, I mean, for example, if you're using fuel, if you're using refuse-derived fuel, you're making pellets out of garbage. And you're gonna give that to the cement plant to make cement. The amount of pollutants, it's not gonna change. And they're making cement right now, and they're gonna be burning something, and whatever they're permitted to burn, that's not gonna change because of the new type of fuel. So it's not like you're adding another level of pollution.
But
I'm not sure.
we're continuing in the process of allowing them to produce these pollutants.
As long as they're making cement, yeah, they're
Yeah.
gonna be putting
have a-
something.
They have a permit for using a fuel source that allows some quantity
Right,
of pollutant.
Emission.
but.
And we're not changing that, and so we're not addressing ways to reduce their pollutants.
No, the permit is not gonna change because of the fuel they use.
But there are the impacts from the waste to fuel process
Yeah.
itself, which is what we were
Okay.
discussing.
So,
Yeah, Andrew,
So-
Oh, go ahead.
Andrew, there's pollutants and then there's also carbon emissions.
Mhm.
The waste would otherwise be sequestered in a landfill over a longer period of time instead of getting burned now. And that's a consideration as well. And
May I introduce one more variable? What about methane in these landfills? Because sequestered, the carbon may be sequestered, but if there's a lot of organic material in there, then there's going to be methane release, which is.
so the landfill that we currently use, which is New River Landfill by Rayford, they just started landfill gas project.
Right.
So they are pulling some of that methane, that gas, and using it as a fuel. It is great. It's
Mhm.
far less efficient than an anaerobic digester.
Mhm.
And does the other landfill source some of their waste material to some of these plants?
Landfills don't source out anything.
Okay.
They just collect stuff.
But the other factor is the boundary for that zero waste or the circular economy. I
Mhm.
mean, if the cement plant can purchase fuel pellets produced in potentially a more
Local.
environmentally harmful. Well, I mean,
transportation
from outside the county, or, I mean, did the, then,
Yeah, like right now,
alternative is-
I don't know what's in those pellets. I
right,
mean,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so we could be essentially importing the emissions.
Right.
The emissions we're importing could be higher.
Yeah.
potentially,
More
if we
plastic,
produce
more
it.
plastic
Yeah.
in those pellets than.
All right.
But
I
remember,
really
we do have a boundary. The cement company can only, they have a limit to how much emissions they can produce. So
And-
it's always looked at.
But I'm thinking of the emissions for production of the pellets themselves, the primary
Oh.
emissions associated with the product that's
Oh.
going to the cement plant.
Mhm.
So if we go back along the supply chain and there's no mechanism to regulate what types of pellets they're bringing in.
But-
I'm just saying, I don't know
Right.
what other facilities that would produce this.
Right.
Well, and the other thing, and there may be other uses for these pellets. I'm just gonna
Right.
talk about cement plant because it's just kind of interesting to me, and I've been
Right.
here a long time. but-
Right.
But if you kind of
But,
make a bigger picture, you will be, I
right,
mean, you gotta take into account the emissions from my 32 vehicles per day, hauling 800 tons to New River, and whatever emissions
right,
somebody's putting to bring those pellets to the city of Newberry.
right.
so Gus, can we go back to the slide with the triangles? That's the best way.
The pyramids,
Yeah.
sort of. Two-dimensional
Mhm.
pyramids.
So on this, with these models,
Mhm.
you know, it's really hard to read some of the small ones, but it would seem any of this waste energy doesn't fit, not allowed within this, like unacceptable in the zero waste hierarchy. It seems to be the case here if we were to use this hierarchy at all, which then, in result,
So no, it's only unacceptable for zero waste. It's actually better than a landfill for the R2.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's hard to
Yeah.
see what would fit
So
where.
different.
Mhm.
Now, with that being said, I understand the EPA's they may be revising the model.
Yeah.
I don't know what the outcome, I don't know what, but they generally are supportive of waste to energy alternatives.
And I do have another question, because we're talking about a lot of things that are very detailed and we don't have the answers. You know, and with the things we're asking, I think should be actually studied and measured, right, before we actually make just a policy change decision. Is anyone looking at it to that level of detail? That's where my question comes in. Because if this reduces the amount of methane we're burning, you know, like say the new plant, the concrete plant or whomever, you know, is getting LNG from GRU, if this offsets that, since you know, methane has that higher carbon intensity, or global warming intensity, then maybe temporarily until we can switch to renewables, this plant might be a better solution because it's carbon not. But I don't know, and that has to be actually studied.
So the short answer is no. And the reason is because right now we're looking at a policy decision, not on a specific project.
Mhm.
Once the policies change, if it allows some more projects, then we will get at that level of detail. Like right now, I don't have any project proposal in front of me.
Right.
Because those companies were told, you don't fit the comp plan, so don't even bother sending something, you're not gonna make it.
Is there a way to change the policy to not just straight up allow these things in without having?
So for my purposes, and this kind of language is in other parts of the comprehensive plan, and that's where Mike is here. So it's just not for solid waste, but for my purposes, I'm just looking at locating facilities at the eco loop.
Mhm.
Just because they meet the comprehensive plan policy, doesn't mean I have to listen to them. The county, we're allowed, we can lease to anybody. We're just putting restrictions on who we will not lease property to.
Right.
But just because you meet this threshold doesn't mean you're gonna get the location.
Yeah.
And the other piece is for all these companies, not also they only want the location, but they also want a long-term contract for the waste. Because that's what they're gonna use to make whatever they're gonna make. But same answer, just because they need it, doesn't mean I have to give it to them. That's
Right.
entirely up to the county commissioners to decide. This is what we're gonna do with the waste and this piece of land.
It would be interesting if we had. This is pie in the sky, I'm gonna say it, but you know, I'm not sure that it's practical. If we had some way of perhaps changing the requirements. So that we could consider more waste to energy solutions. But if there's some kind of written into that was a plan to monitor over the long term, whether this is actually to the benefit of the county, like, and leave open the option in the future that if it were not, if we found that we were actually generating much more pollution within the county because of this, that we would switch at some
So-
point, but they want long-term leases. This is
Right,
the
right.
problem,
So-
and because they're business people, I understand why that works.
So I'm gonna go with a maybe here.
That's all I
gotta
that's
go
all
with
I
a maybe.
expected.
So yeah, they're looking like the CND MRF that we're gonna, materials recovery facility that we're gonna put there. They're looking for a 25-year lease, so they're spending a lot of money.
A lot of money.
So they need some security. That being said, we did put performance standards on their lease.
Right.
You know, they have to supply, I believe it's 20 jobs, and they have to reduce, or they have to divert 25% of the CND waste again. So we can attach performance standards. But with what I think you're talking about, those performance standards that may be a lot more difficult to identify.
To measure, yeah,
To
absolutely.
amend also
And
over
it's something
time.
that the company, I mean, they're a business, they're not gonna say, oh yeah, we're gonna reduce carbon emissions if they're not 100% sure that they're gonna do it.
Right, they want a range that they can work in.
Right, I mean,
Yeah.
they're gonna say,
Yeah.
yeah, we can do this, that's what we're gonna commit for 25-year lease.
What happens if those performance standards are applied to a completely different mechanism? If some point down the road, the county has some policy that says all of the activities taking place in the county must hit a certain standard of greenhouse gas production. Right, and then, so it's not directly part of the contract with these companies, but 5 years from now, you know, when the climate is worse and everybody's freaking out
Right.
and we have some new, we say, well, no, we got to tighten the carbon production a little bit more.
So if it's a state statute, a federal statute.
I doubt it's gonna be a state statute.
Or an actual county code, I mean, any business has to comply with whatever the applicable regulations are.
So that's how you could track it. I mean, if you put some kind of condition into the contract, you're right. The company's gonna say, we can't be sure we'll hit that and make a profit and
Mhm.
do what we want to do. They're not even gonna sign up.
Yeah, I just want to take whatever pathway is the least emissions intensive, and without data to show that, I'm hesitant to change the policy.
Understood.
I think
And-
there are two, sorry, just
No, no,
real
go
quick, like, I agree. I mean, I think there are two metrics that are very hard to measure. But the energy return on energy invested, if
Mhm.
you're doing waste to fuel and comparing scenarios, which I know we don't have proposals yet, but
Mhm.
you know, literature review, I mean, there's gotta be some data that we could look at to get an understanding of that. And then the second one is like the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, similar idea, but
Business case.
yeah.
Is there also a question of when we run out of landfill space?
We are very, very far away from that.
Okay, so that's not within
Yeah,
the 25-year
we
window.
use a regional landfill and they got, yeah, we're not even thinking about that.
Okay,
We're trying to reduce. I mean, one of the biggest climate
Cost.
change impacts that the county has is me. Holding all that garbage over there, so I'd like to get out of that. I don't wanna be the first of the list. So we're just trying to reduce the amount of waste we're sending and get something beneficial out of that
Right,
waste.
right.
I mean,
Well, and I love the rethink, redesign hierarchy,
mhm.
because I think that's what the county's been trying to do. and,
That
you
is
know,
the
started
zero
with-
waste plan.
Yeah,
but that may not be
Sorry.
feasible in the short term.
But we are realistic. I mean,
yeah.
it's gonna be very hard to reduce, recycle and reuse 850 tons per day. So we're looking at other options.
Right.
James, what were you gonna say? Right, I'm sorry.
No, there's just so many possibilities. I mean, I think there's definitely merit for a feasibility study to look in what the consequences of this would be. You know, something else that I keep in mind is that if we're producing this waste locally, we have a ability to have a closer monitoring. We can't regulate what's coming in. If there's a profit potential, these companies will be sourcing that material, whether it's in Florida or somewhere else. But if we're doing it locally, at least we can have a little bit more say on the process and what's allowed. On your point, I think that if we were to open the door completely, these companies are gonna put in, you know, they're gonna have a sunk cost, a sunk investment. And they're probably talking about hundreds of millions of dollars and they're not gonna wanna walk away from that. So it's not gonna be just like, flip a switch and it's over. Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to have more information about these things before you just open the door.
But you're not talking about opening the door wide with these changes. You're talking about adjusting them a little bit. This is not a complete top to bottom rewrite of these rules.
Not what I had in mind.
It's the
I'm
the
sorry.
component that's
No.
really being adjusted would be whether or not we're gonna allow some percent of plastic.
Right.
In the fields of waste.
In the
or
field of
waste.
waste. Yeah.
Because that produces in the cost of burning, that's gonna produce these pollutants. Atmospheric pollutants, is that correct?
It's not, plastic's just one component that we're worried about. It's the carbon emissions as well. It's the using the materials that are going into the waste to landfill in the best ways.
Right.
The organic materials should be composted,
Mhm.
not going to this, but they're gonna get rerouted.
Mhm.
Since we don't have mass, about my understanding, we don't have
Mm.
mass composting, there's a lot of waste that can
Well,
be taught.
Not necessarily.
No.
For example, one of the proposals that we received was because they're not mutually exclusive, you can do more than one thing.
Mhm.
So one of the proposals that we received that didn't make the cut last time was to get all the garbage, use an anaerobic digester, generate gas,
Mhm.
feed the gas to somebody who can use it,
Mhm.
and then whatever is left, that's what you use to make your refuse derived fuel.
Mhm.
And that's when they went away. So they could have just said, well, we're gonna make gas and we're gonna take this, digest it, and since it has plastic, well, we're gonna take it to New River. Or we can make refuse-derived fuels and keep getting something out of the garbage.
Mm,
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah, I mean, the plastic concern is valid, but that's gonna improve, it sounds like it can improve over time, you have one person, or business you talk to said they can do better,
Mhm.
that's great. And if we're worrying about this pollutants, in our air is a concern, but I don't think it's the biggest or only concern. Just because we keep coming back to that. So,
But we really don't know what they're using right now, how much they're actually burning and polluting at the cement plant right now with what they're importing.
Yeah, we do. You can go to DEP website and look at their emissions. They have-
And they're within the code.
They have continuous monitoring
Right.
like GRU
Right.
does, like cement plant, like all big air permit
Right.
facilities.
So we
have
do
to-
have a ceiling. They're not just doing things, they're within the current emission guideline.
Yeah, a lot of the, and I don't know if Amanda's online, because she probably can explain it a lot better than I can. But a lot of the issues that Zero Waste International and Zero Waste Gainesville have with landfills is they are very much in the best use for that particular material. And they don't see burning as the best use for anything, because you're, in their view, destroying resources. So that's where a lot of their opposition comes.
And the emissions, to
And the
sequester them.
Right.
I mean, you can't, it's not even,
And then on the other side is,
yeah.
the EPA, and I'm just guessing for them is, we can talk about all we want, the stuff is going to a landfill. And
Right.
that's where it is right now.
Yeah.
Can we get something out of it before we send whatever is left
Right.
to the landfill? At least that's the way I look at it.
Mhm.
Yes, I have a question. Maybe this might, the policy, the way it's written now, it's, can do anything. I just want to make sure when you're talking about allowing these at the eco park, you're not opening up the policy in general to everyone to use the waste, and what I'm concerned with is other entities coming in privately and starting something that we don't have that control over, like we would at the eco.
Right, and that's what I was saying, that language is in several places of the comp plan, not just in the solid waste element. So I'm kind of just focused on the solid waste element. It can be a different language than for the rest of the comp plan. That being said, if you're gonna locate one company, there's only one transfer station, that's mine. So it's not like you're gonna come and put a waste storage facility if you don't have a long-term contract with the county to supply the waste. It just wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
So it's a little bit kind of self-correcting, if that makes any sense.
Just to follow your point just a little bit. At the time the plan was amended with the evaluation update in 2019, the board had the prohibition of waste energy in several places in the plan to underscore clearly not provide a workaround for that sort of, to just cut that off. So it's in the hazmat code, it's in the energy elements.
Just like
and-
three or four different places.
I think one of the places, maybe. But that was clearly expressed by the board. Let's find a few places to head off and attempt. Yeah.
But the one that I'm concerned is the one that dictates what the county can do with its waste.
Mhm.
So all the other ones can remain in place. You can still prohibit all those kind of businesses to be outside and let the county do something else with the waste at the eco loop.
We keep talking about the cement plant, but I think GRU is also looking at the possibility of using this as a fuel source. So there is that necessity of thinking about it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where, then, if you take one step back, the common denominator is like the production itself and considering the impact there. And are we just gonna be are we currently importing an embedded, carbon footprint?
When you're
Because
saying the production, meaning the making of the
Of
actual pellets.
pellets or, the fuel source that,
So, and I'm not an expert, and those
Yeah.
guys some of them were on the phone last time, but I mean, making refuse-derived fuel is not an excessively complicated process. Chemical recycling is, that's a whole
yes,
much
Yeah.
more complicated. But refuse derived fuel, it's a very straightforward
Yeah.
process. I mean,
Yeah,
you're
so
just
it takes-
removing what's not combustible, you're compressing it to the customer's needs, you're providing the BTU value they need for whatever you're doing. So there's not that many emissions or anything associated with the making of the fuel itself.
It's my understanding that GRU is principally producing their power with methane, right? Or with
With bio,
biofuel. Or natural gas or something.
Don't quote me on this.
Okay.
My percentages may be off, but I think last fiscal year was 30% renewable, which is mostly biomass.
Right.
Some solar fit, some renewable. Landfill gas generation, very small portion of that. So it's about 30%. Of the remainder, I want to say 60%, 66% was natural gas.
So a relevant question to what's done with this waste derived fuel is that GRU starts to use it as a fuel source. Is it preferable to these other fuel sources, to some of these other fuel sources? If it replaced some of the natural gas, would it be less environmentally problematic?
So the thought is that yes, so we would continue to run the biomass as it is. You would not replace the renewable fuel source with something else. The only other unit we have in our system that would be able to handle a solid fuel that way would be unit 2. Unit 2 right now is strictly it's mostly natural gas, almost 90+% natural gas. So we would offset the natural gas consumption with this fuel source.
Is that an incentive to go this way then?
It depends. We don't have the
It
data.
depends,
It's a
yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
I mean, and I assume this business would be buying its electricity from GRU. Because you said there's no additional emissions from creating the pellet, but it takes energy to make pellets.
Sure.
Right.
And so that's it's just there's so many numbers that go into this. It's hard to make a educated opinion regarding emissions.
And that's another, and the other factor, sorry, John, last,
No,
is that, what's the potential offset? Is it like a 0.5% of the remaining 66%, or is it, potentially you could offset 10 additional percent of the current natural gas production? Like how,
It all depends. We're not talking about 10% offset,
No.
probably somewhere in the 2 to 3%.
Yeah.
right.
Just does leaving the policy in place prevent, actually getting more data from these folks on the plans they're trying to make and us actually diving into these numbers?
So if I were to get my crystal ball out there and the board decides not to change the policy, then the only businesses that have approached me that would qualify would be somebody with an anaerobic digester to create
Mhm.
gas. Can they make it profitable enough without having something else to do with that digestate? I don't know. I mean, that's a business decision. Obviously, it would be much better for them if they can take that digestate and make fuel as opposed to give it to me and I'm gonna charge them to haul it to the river.
Right.
So I don't know what the economics are, but when it was originally presented, obviously, the more they can get out of it, the better they are. So I don't know if we'll get somebody to just do that.
If you change the rules. If the rules were changed so as to open up discussions with potential businesses that might do this. Can we require that they come up with harder numbers than we have now in terms of what percentage of the waste can be biologically produced, right? And what can be separated if it's biological material that can be composted, what percentage can be put in this anaerobic
Yeah, I mean,
solution.
if the policy were to be changed and then those folks will have an incentive to come up with an actual plan
Right.
and sit down with us and discuss these different things.
So the key thing about it, if the policy's changed, it doesn't force us to sort of hire anybody who says, oh, I can do that.
Right.
No, because
We still have the freedom to say, your plan has got a problem.
we still control, even if it doesn't have a problem,
Right, okay.
Mhm.
it's still the county's garbage and it's still a county industrial park and we decide who we lease it to. We don't have to lease it to anybody.
even if we change the plan and they come in, we still don't have to,
Do anything with it.
right?
Yeah, I find that a greater incentive for softening the edges of the plan a little bit, so long as we have someone like yourself who's in a position to accurately assess, well, what really are gonna be the
There's gonna be
outcomes.
a lot more people.
Well, yeah, okay, but I'm saying, I said some people, many people like yourself, because,
We were just-
no, I'm, you know, I'm sorry, I'm gonna throw you a compliment here, and I mean it genuinely. You are clearly tuned to the complexity of the situation, and you're actually thinking about best practices
Oh, yeah,
here with a long-term view. You're not just trying to, you know, make the waste go away,
Mhm.
right? And so long as that would be our goal, then softening the edges of these rules to allow this might give us a chance to look at, well, what can a business actually do for us?
So when we did the first round of recruitment last year, and actually I didn't come to this group, but we took all the proposals we got. We took the MERF, we took the anaerobic digestion. And we took those companies with us and we went to EPAC and we went to EDAC and they gave presentations and those committees got involved. So if the policy were to be changed, yeah, you can be sure I'm gonna be back with whoever we're talking to and discuss that with you folks.
And we gotta remember the objective of each committee. Ours is to look at the impact on environment.
Mhm.
Theirs is looking more on the economics. And yes, when I'm hopeful that the technologies will be to a point where we can zero in and reduce some of the impact.
Mhm.
And if we don't allow that, then the technologies can't develop. So one of the big things I do know is when companies start to compete technically, it makes things change. If they have no incentive from an economic standpoint to do that, we don't develop. So I'm thinking that if we open up and allow, and again, we still haven't given up our right to say that plan doesn't look too good.
But we won't know until we give them the incentive to try to make it look
That's right.
good for us. you
Right.
know?
I agree. Then just one more concern was the concern Stephen brought up. How do we control for private industry elsewhere? Is it already controlled for because of the other places in the comprehensive plan that this is included, or?
They don't have the garbage.
But that may be something that you can
Yeah, but
present
it'll
in
allow
your
other-
statement of support for considering the
Mhm.
change to the policy is that with the notion that, you know, we're gonna have safeguards
Yeah.
to prevent, you know, outside private entities from skirting around the policy. So
Just
So-
narrow it to the eco
Yeah.
loop and to the.
If you narrow it to the eco loop, that's the effect, right? The effect is that.
now you're affecting GRU.
Okay.
Yeah, but John, your point, and Terry, your point, it's like, I'm thinking that gets to that question of where is the boundary we're drawing to measure whether it's, you know, a net positive or negative with greenhouse gas emissions and everything else. And, you know, I think about the surrounding regions here, and I would much rather have industry be competing here under, you know, Gus and his crystal ball and someone who's very
It's
well
well-intentioned crystal ball, right?
then, like, you know, going to some neighboring counties where they won't have to do anything. Or do very little relative to what we would expect would be done at the eco loop. I mean, I can't imagine that
That
trade-off.
is a big consideration.
Yeah, it's a big consideration, I think.
Mhm.
And, you know, if we're exporting our waste already, some of it, a lot of
Right,
it.
a lot of
I mean, I
850
feel like
tons.
we sort of have a responsibility to.
Yeah,
Envision how big a pile 850 tons is.
per day.
You see it every day.
It's a mountain, it's a mountain every day.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, like, does the county, you know, wanna have higher mountains in Florida, their landfills.
We're
that's
gonna
the
need
only
them when the
thing
sea
we
level
have.
rises.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but it's
Yeah.
exactly true. Yeah.
Anytime we can keep using things and breaking them down, that just makes it makes a lot of sense. But we gotta always look at the ramifications of it. But taking things down to the lowest terms is always taking all the energy out as you can.
Does an eco loop restriction injure GRU's potential uses of these materials and limit them because?
We have a permit, as long as we stay on our emissions from it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever business settles there could sell it to Geria.
You could sell it to GRU, oh, okay,
Yeah, so we could just make the provision being specific to the eco loop. To explore options that might be available.
Okay,
So
we're good about that. Yeah,
So Gus, can you go to your, list of reach options?
Oh.
And then maybe they can maybe look at that. Modify something. for-
And if we were, agree on a statement by April, is that enough time for you for your May meeting?
Yeah,
So do we have a,
they-
so these are the options.
actually, I may be just cutting it
yeah, closer,
very
Yeah.
tight.
We-
very
Yeah,
tight.
we are not gonna, I don't think. We're gonna get more data. You don't have any
No,
more data,
no.
so
No,
this is,
I got
this is
nothing
it.
else.
do we have a sort of like we've done in the past where you and Stephen write up something and we go
A
forward
statement,
with a statement, yeah, that
Yeah.
summarizes the sentiment of the committee,
The challenge here, when we do that, that's a letter.
okay,
And that's to go up.
What we need is a motion.
okay, oh,
So the
okay.
motion could be written that kind of form.
Right.
We say we support an opt-in
God.
to allow changes to the policy.
No, I did not
Provided it
think
stays
it's
within the
done.
realm of the legal loop, and give direction to the chair to draft
Okay,
a letter back to Gus or something, or to the commission.
Yeah.
Or you can just come out and just state it.
So I would make a
Nothing but
motion.
commissioners.
yeah,
I mean, I would motion that we would recommend option number 3 with the caveats that,
it applies to the eco
Good.
loop,
it applies to the eco loop. We're considering the fact that, the alternatives are even bigger unknowns in terms of
Right,
where
right,
the
right,
industry is gonna locate
right,
within the state, or, I mean, they're gonna go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about this a lot in my work, because I work with developers on new land development, and it's like, oh man, I wish I could just say, no, we're not gonna develop it, but they're going to develop,
Develop
it's
it
going to
somewhere,
happen, so.
Somewhere,
I think
So
about it
split
the
it
same
up.
way, like there are manufacturing standards that provide that oversight
Okay.
for the actual production itself. But where they locate and the oversight that Ecoloop can have and the commission can have gives us an opportunity to really be careful, like look more closely and raise the bar on those standards relative to other locations.
so do we need a formal motion?
we do.
So I'll
So,
make a formal motion that we would
okay,
write a letter of recommendation.
motion.
We have to make a
You
motion,
write a letter, you can just have a
Trying to say-
recommendation.
yeah, we're gonna make
Okay.
we're gonna make a motion that
Yes.
we're gonna make a
Okay,
recommendation.
okay.
And then there's a wing and a prayer in there somewhere too.
We're
Recommend option
Yeah,
3.
You move that we recommend,
I move that you move.
okay, all right, I make okay, please, and you can adjust this necessary, I am making a motion. That we. That we. Do we have to say recommend, is that fine? I'm making a motion that we recommend option 3
Mhm.
with the proviso that it applies to the eco loop
Period.
Only.
Period.
only, period.
Yes,
And I'll
That-
second that motion.
all right, it's been moved.
Before you vote. Yeah, I would recommend public comment.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we have someone online as well as someone in the. Online. Go ahead, Carly, since, let me allow that person to, raise their hand if they want to speak.
A moment ago, you talked about, certain business proposals come, you don't like them, you turn them down. If that's done without reference to a solid policy, you are inviting litigation. Matter of fact, it's chum. Lawyers, so,
Yeah.
And now you say a lot of these groups, they want a long-term,
Carly,
commitment. They want a
can you come
25
up here, so that you're on the, people online can hear you?
They want a 25-year lease. So you have to check with your legal department to see if what I'm about to suggest is legitimate. But you would think in 25 years, I think
Technology.
we presume there'll be some innovation. Maybe you can have a codicil in their agreement that they must help you evaluate new technologies for reducing or removing greenhouse gases. And even ask them, even have them promise in advance to commit X% of their most recent annual net to incorporating new technologies. And, maybe even offer them a subcommittee of this group that they can come and attend to discuss those technologies and decide which ones should be incorporated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the level of nuance that I think is important here.
Yeah.
That's why actually studying the options is important.
Mhm.
I assume, if I'm wrong, but that these businesses do have to follow our existing net zero plan, which means they have to be looking at ways to decarbonize. So maybe they invest in their own on-site solar, so they're not using as much fuel from GRU, unless GRU's mix is already improved, then that would be the route they go. There's not one way to get there, but as long as they are beholden to that. Maybe there are ways for them to get there faster, or we require them to get there faster. But yeah, there's a level of nuance here that's important. I guess it's just missing from this. So if all of this is allowing us to explore other options, great, but it needs to be based on what is the greenhouse, like the option that includes the least amount of greenhouse gas emission. And we don't have good mechanisms right now for that in our decision.
And what we just said, we need a baseline to compare against. And I do think that, that 3 opens it up. But yes, let's go ahead. Roberta?
Hi there. Yeah, Roberta Gassmeyer. The problem I have with the waste to energy scheme is that you're creating a market now for garbage, and it incentivizes the production of more, whereas recycling incentivizes the production of less. So I don't know how that's addressed in this policy. What will we do once there's something that's, producing profit from our garbage? How will we continue to limit what we send there or reduce it?
That's an excellent point too, because if
yes.
we're following the reuse, the zero waste model,
So,
inherently, we're gonna reduce what we're giving this company.
so my answer to that, and it's entirely without our data, but if you look at Europe, most European countries do a much better job than we do in reducing,
Oh, yes.
reusing, recycling.
No doubt.
So,
And they also have waste to energy. So there is a way to do.
yeah,
There is a way. The policy doesn't get you there, but there is a way to get there because they're there.
Well, what you envisage at the Eco Loop is not going to use 850 tons of garbage. Right? They're not going to take 850 tons a day of
I
garbage
don't
to
think
do
they can
this.
handle that much.
No, so even if
we
we
still need to,
have other policies to reduce the waste stream, it's unlikely, regrettably, that those policies are going to sufficiently reduce the waste stream that this company will say, wait a second, we can't do it.
right. So we're not removing and not doing the other things.
Right.
This is just another item. And it gets back to conservation. We in order to make sure that we have the right amount of energy or anything, we still have to conserve. So we still have to do those, the 5 R's. We still need to do that.
I mean, so long as the contract with this company doesn't lock us into a minimum amount of waste every day.
But, I think, so in last month's discussion, that Roberta's getting to the point Jackie kept making, that it's a slippery slope. If we incentivize one, then are we disincentivizing the, reduce, reuse, recycle? But it's also not there's not a one, it's not an either or. We have to do both and try and consider it collectively, like how are we reducing together? And with the policy, the point you made is critical, like by exploring these options, that gives the commission the the ability to set policy where the industry can't come in and then just take over. I mean, they can set the legal framework, to make sure that we're trying to achieve actually in reality, creating the right incentives to achieve a net gain or net benefit.
My understanding of loosening these rules, option number 3, doesn't preclude all these other considerations down the road. It does not, right? It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, the zero waste plan is still in place and we're still doing that stuff.
Right, so what we're doing is making it possible, I think this was what you said, John, making it possible to incentivize creative solutions that are now being blocked because
Right.
of an absolutist reading of the current regulations. But it doesn't require that once we loosen the current regulations, that we've jettisoned entirely any consideration of those secondary factors. Or other factors that might seem relevant in the light of what they propose to us.
We could also state in this that we, at the discretion of the Eco Loop and other relevant committees, if the proposed business model isn't in line with either a climate action plan or environmental production agency plan, that it is our choice to reject that business proposal. So that we are in this statute itself, we're giving ourselves the out so that we don't have to fight with that.
That's kind of like giving yourself the right to be arbitrary.
And if I was gonna sign a 20-year contract, I would kind of say,
Yes.
oh, I don't know about that.
So, and this is from last month's presentation, but whatever business we take to the Eco Loop, I mean, they gotta fit within this bigger frame. It's just not about the
Right.
policy. The policy is the one that kind of got us here, but there's this much bigger framework of things we're gonna be looking at for those businesses to fit in.
So that's the problem, is that the current policy 1.2.5 is the bottleneck,
For
which
some
is
degree.
keeping us from exploring these other
Correct.
options.
Correct.
Okay. My motion is still on the floor, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're,
Are you okay with that?
Terry's made a motion. Why don't you repeat it since,
Oh, gosh.
yeah,
Ah,
so we can get it,
Wait, is Steven here? We don't want it not to count if he's not here.
yeah. My motion was that this committee recommends
go back.
Oh, so.
recommends the appropriate changes to policy 1.2.5 so that
And other related.
and other related policies, update 1.2.5 and other related policies to include alternative landfill diversion options, but restricts that to the eco loop. And I think everything else is understood.
Yeah.
That's the motion. It's that
Okay,
simple.
and it's just, the only thing we kind of added,
It's restricted to the Eco Loop.
Yeah, restricted to the eco loop. Yeah.
is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. It's been moved and second. Any other discussion?
Just that this is gonna be going to the commissioners and they're gonna have, this is just a recommendation.
It's a
Just to keep
recommendation.
in mind that we're
Yeah.
not,
We're not dictating what they do. We
Right,
can't.
it's just like the other recommendation.
Right, from the other.
So it is going with a wing and a prayer.
Yeah. All right, all in favor?
I,
Any against that motion? Abstentions, anybody not voting? All right, so that's what we got that.
Thank you.
thank
All
you,
right.
guys. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
guys.
Your patience is very much appreciated.
Roberta, I didn't, no comments on that, right? Are you okay? You got silent there.
No, she was muted.
Oh.
I am good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I will let you know, Steve, that the chat is disabled, so I can't answer your questions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think,
Thank
Yeah.
you, Roberta.
Thanks,
Oh, you're
Roberta.
welcome.
All right. We're, yeah, we need, anybody need a break? Okay, so we're gonna continue here. Gus, again, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
This is very kind.
Our fifth item is to continue our discussion on the tasks and responsibilities of each of our members to meet with the committees, the goals and the local climate partnerships. So does everybody remember let's do some updates. We were going to come up with a way in which we ask the questions and make sure that as we contacted our groups, that we were kind of talking on the same page. Did we get that? Did we ever get
Yes.
a sheet?
Yeah, I provided that sheet with who is gonna contact who, with also a description of what you'd be asking. You know, Betsy and I, as well as the interns, have been making a lot of contacts. So we've been
Yeah.
doing a lot of that information. This is related to the June 2nd climate event. However, it would be good to reach out to your groups still, especially in the area of whether they'd be interested in a booth, just participating through advertising, or if they're interested in being maybe even a sponsor, or interested in giving a short talk or something like that.
This was the talking points document that you
Yes.
distributed. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got
So
it.
that you should have that list. We're gonna have to have a flyer out by the end of this month. We wanted that flyer out by the April 3rd Joint Water and Climate Policy Board meeting. I know this is kind of blending into our next topic. But so one thing we can do is we can get that flyer pulled together. That may help you all as well. But we definitely don't want to delay till late next month in terms of contacting these groups, because to make the flyer, we've got to have that kind of agenda set too. We can have a little bit of flexibility as to who might be speaking, but in terms of its format, it's gonna have to be pretty set.
Do you have a date you'd like for us to have made contact and provided you that info?
Well, what we'll need to do is we'll need to get you, well, you can first of all, you can make contact before we get the flyer.
Yeah.
Our hope is to get the flyer out finished by the end of next week. Does that seem reasonable? Yeah.
Depends entirely on, we can get that logo
Yeah.
finalized.
Yeah. Yeah,
A
so
lot of star opinions.
my goal will be by the end of the first week of April. So what is that, on April 7th, 8th, if you
7th.
can make contact with those groups that you were willing to contact
Mhm.
by then, that would be great. We should have those flyers out for you by then as well.
I will add that I've opened discussions with our communications team, and we'll be opening conversations with IT about getting a website put together. On the website, I'd like to have basically a little sign up form, potential partners that we can start really getting, okay, they're committed, they put this form, we have sort of basic information for them. So it'd be great to have that done by the end of the month too. It should be a pretty simple design.
Yeah.
So,
So that's, they're gonna have some options, right? A booth, speaking, and we'll have those kind of listed.
yeah, we'll sort of say what are they interested in? Because we don't really know at this point, like what the interest is gonna be and how many people are gonna be interested in what sorts of things. So we'll kind of provide them some ideas and then we'll sort of. put
Yeah,
together from there.
we need some common format that we can put everybody in, because everybody might come up with so many different formats.
Yeah.
We need to set the options of the format.
So
And
may-
number wise.
Yeah, so-
Number wise, how many?
maybe to
people-
help you guys understand, Betsy, you want to describe what the event currently is designed to be, or I can do it if you like, but.
Yeah, so the idea, of course, is that this is gonna be an opportunity to introduce the climate vulnerability analysis to the community. So along that lines, we're hoping to start the event at 3 p.m. From 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. It's gonna be a registration only group of community leaders in the meeting lodge. The reason that's registration only is because there's limited space inside in that area. And for that time, we're going to do presentation about what's in the climate vulnerability analysis. We're gonna do some small working groups to ask questions and have experts there to answer questions. And really do a deep dive into what is in the vulnerability analysis, what that means for Alachua County. What people's thoughts are on how to address those issues. And then at about 5 o'clock, we'll start opening it up more generally. So booths will be set up outside. And that's when we really hope that it's gonna be more of a fair atmosphere. So we're telling everybody, we're looking for games, looking for events, we're looking for a poetry reading. We want to make this a hopeful event. We don't want people, everybody who's been scared into believing and acting on climate change has already been scared into it. So the goal is that we want this to be
Empowering.
open, public, empowering,
Mhm.
and hopefully good enough that they want to do it again next year
Mhm,
when we have a climate action plan that we'll be announcing.
mhm.
So that's the goal.
So, so with the booths and tables that these these groups are going to be participating in, we're thinking of doing rotating short talks. That are just really interesting for people on climate, starting at 5, so kind of short, fun, 10-minute kind of talks where, families can hear interesting.
Will we do that in the lodge?
Yeah, that'll be in the lodge, or possibly we're gonna have a large 40 by 60 tent as well. That may be where people sit to eat, depending on weather too. So we're also looking at
Outside
Food.
Pascagoula, yeah.
food trucks participating and things like that. So we're gonna do, our hope is to do some tree planting, maybe start an official arboretum on the site. If you haven't been, it's at Pascagoula, should have said that already. It's gonna be at Pascagoula, and it's got a lot of open area.
Absolutely. Who are you gonna do
So-
tree planting with?
Yeah, we have an arborist do of ACF, Alachua Forever. Conservation Forever, which is in our Environmental Protection Department. Lacey will probably lead our arborist will lead the.
So you're talking about Lacey. That's what I
Yes,
thought
we're
you were.
talking about
And I work with
Lacey.
Lacey all the
Yeah.
time, on these tree plantings.
Yeah,
so,
and we would be leading guided trips, nature walks as well.
Nice.
So we're trying to do a mix of family events. We may even do tree giveaways and things like that. We want to try to offset our impacts, our carbon impacts as well. So we're looking at ways to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
we have a meeting set up on Friday with We Are Neutral to
Mhm.
provide us a quote for what it would look like to have a carbon neutral event.
Mhm.
So that's something that we can talk about after that meeting and as we have a little more details on what
Yeah.
that process is gonna look like.
We're looking at busing people in from the city at one or two locations as well, if possible. So that we can also reduce that impact as well and allow people who, maybe aren't able to get out there and have a car. Obviously, we want to reduce the amount of people driving vehicles.
So I have 2 specific ideas. I don't know, maybe these have already come up, but, and I can't remember the name of the group, but there's a group that hosts storytelling. Where people like you
Yeah,
might go to Cypress and Grove or First Magnitude, but they'll have like a theme around which people stand up on stage and tell their story. And it's like really entertaining and moving but it would be neat to have. And I'll try to remember if nobody here. Does anybody know who I'm talking
Guts
about?
and Glory or?
Guts and Glory.
Guts
Guts and Glory. Okay, Guts
Oh.
and Glory is the one I've seen. But, and obviously the theme would be around climate solutions. I would think, or something related to that.
Yeah.
That would be really fun. And the second thing is the nature walks, like having a gentleman from the Museum of Natural History, they could do a pollinator walk,
We
basically,
have,
or like,
yeah.
we probably do this with the
We
county.
have, I'm on, the board for Friends of Pascagoula, and we have a butterfly garden
Mhm.
that's really starting to
Yeah.
really look nice out there now.
Yep.
We got all kind of butterflies that come,
Yeah.
so that would be good. I don't think we're gonna have our nature trails ready yet, but once we get those ready, that's something that we're working on. That's gonna be really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the butterfly garden. would be
Butterfly
nice to have
garden would
some-
be excellent.
lepidopterists or someone from the museum.
I think my kids put that butterfly garden. I think it was my volunteer students back last year.
Oh, wow.
Put
It's a
that
big
in, yeah.
group, yep.
It's a big
So
group.
I'm gonna be that
60
guy.
63 people.
We have 45 minutes left. Is there anything we actually need to do regarding the event? It sounds like we're just waiting for this look at the website to come out, which will really help with getting signups. And then as far as our roles and responsibilities.
I would say that it wouldn't hurt to continue outreach. A lot of times with form submissions and those sorts of things that people already know and they're expecting to see it, they're a lot more likely to fill it out.
Okay.
So I'd say by all means, continue reaching out. If
Any,
there's-
any cost? No. Any cost to them? What
at
what are
this
we doing?
point, Steve, I don't think we've had.
No,
Is there a
I'm
charge
looking
or
into the
anything?
issues related to insurance policies and things like that, so I'll get, if there is a cost, it's probably gonna cover that if necessary, but
Yeah.
I don't anticipate that to be large.
I was unfortunately absent from the last meeting. So do we have boilerplate that we use to contact
Talked
these?
about making that.
The contact.
Yeah, to make the
Yeah,
content.
He sent that out a while
Maybe
ago.
maybe-
I'll look to see
maybe
if
I
we can
missed it.
find it, yeah.
There are a few uncalled for groups on this spreadsheet that I realize I could contact. So I can notify you that
Okay,
I'm offering to contact them. Is that
Okay.
okay?
Sure.
I'll also say thank you to Eric and GRU for sending us their list of organizations that aren't necessarily traditional climate organizations.
Yeah,
And
there
I'd
are
like to encourage too, if you're part of those, the idea is that we're really trying to bring everybody
Sure.
into the climate and conversations. And one of the big things that Electric County might be facing is climate refugees from other areas.
Well, precisely the ones that I'm flagging for myself here, there are a couple of justice organizations
Perfect.
that I want to
because
reach.
We're gonna have to build resilient human systems.
Sure,
as well,
absolutely.
so,
No,
I mean,
And a little bit of duplication is not a
Yeah,
bad thing. I mean, you might want to start, you may have already been contacted, but if
yeah.
not, yeah.
but we do have boilerplate, right? We have boilerplate.
The
So-
talking points.
The
that-
talking points. Oh, the
Yeah,
talking points are here.
Can we come up with a common letter of introduction? That would really, that hit those bullet points. That would help.
Yeah, we can translate the talking points into
Yeah.
something a little more formal.
And yeah, and then we can interject the names, but
Very
that
good.
way we'll have the same message in the same tone.
Very good.
That's,
That makes sense.
I'm
Yeah.
very much in favor of always having the message coming from industry.
Yeah, we'll work on pulling that together. I think our interns have created a letter
Yeah,
for their groups that they've been reaching out to.
okay. That way we're saying the same thing, communicating the same tone.
To your question, John, about there being sort of a format, like specific booths, or what tends to happen is, which is we've got these other brilliant ideas of how we'd like to interact. So we're struggling a little bit when saying, oh, well, sign up to have a booth, when maybe they don't want to have a booth, maybe they want to
Right.
do a pollinator talk.
Right.
So it's gonna be one of the challenges we're working right now on form.
And we can't have a setup for every kind of thing either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me just ask, I mean,
Have an
ask,
other
how would you like to
option,
interact
yeah.
if the above options
Yeah,
don't work?
Yeah.
yeah.
And other
Put the
options.
standard options and then,
Well, that would be
Other,
the other,
yeah.
long form.
Yeah.
So,
And this starting at 5 o'clock goes to when?
8:30,
8:30.
based on when the sunrise occurs. We don't want people to be out there in dark, but
Yeah. And I want you to know that we have now, the name of the street that's in front of Coscowilla is called Friends of Coscowilla Incorporated. We had Keep Alachua County Beautiful, gave us a sign, and we keep that road clean now.
We have another event at Cuscowilla in April, don't we?
yes, we do. It's an Earth Day event.
Yeah, that's right.
So we'll
there's
be
the event.
promoting this event at that event.
Because I'm rounding up students
Yeah.
to help with that
And-
event.
When I'm gonna do a press release about the Earth Day events, we're
Okay.
gonna mention
Okay, cool.
that event, but then we'll also mention this one as well.
Alright,
So,
okay.
If
yeah.
you've got students that are interested in being rounded up, we have gotten the go-ahead from Jamie at Cuscowilla to house them overnight if they want to be volunteers to
They're
help with
interested
clean
in
up and set up.
overnight
Oh, that's an
Just
interesting
make
option. I think some of my students
Yeah.
would be interested in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cause I don't know, I have this cohort of students that do tree plantings with Lacey
Yeah.
4 or 5 times a semester.
So maybe you're familiar, there's a student org called UF Eco, falls under Unlitter, I don't know if y'all have engaged with them yet. But they created this UF Eco group to try to consolidate Gainesville's climate groups. Their main goal is to provide internship and work opportunities to their group, but I think that can be expanded to being a focal point for, contact.
So this is UF, you said it was.
called UF
It
I
falls
think
under
our intern
Unlitter.
has been communicating with them, but if not, we'll make sure for sure.
If not, other things, I know.
Okay.
The great women running it. And they might be able to, that could be, if your students aren't available, or maybe both, that could be a way to help. Hands.
I'd also add if there's gonna be anybody under 18 that is interested, maybe let us know early. We might have to talk to risk management if there's any forms or.
Yeah, these are college students.
Yeah.
They were college students.
Okay. All right, anything else? We're kind of moving on to
Solar project.
the solar project contract.
So Jackie isn't here, but what her concern was, that, and maybe you can address this, Eric, was that she had heard that the city was going to be discussing a contract on April 20th, the possibility of no longer keeping the contract.
Right.
So Jackie's interest was to try to keep the contract going in support of solar projects. So I don't
I was
know.
gonna say, my thought on this one, there's not much to discuss, and we're currently waiting to see the status of GRU regarding it, our ownership of GRU. So I don't know if there's a lot for us to do here, other than say, I guess we could say we support it and want to continue. But
I don't know, Eric, if that helps you at all in terms of.
Yes. Well, I mean, this group is feel free to lend your support. It would be duly noted to the commission. I believe the commission, because of the JLAC proceed. Sorry, I use these terms all day, every day now, so. Joint Legislative Audit Committee, did anybody see the video? Parts of the video?
Parts, yeah.
Okay, so effectively what happened is, the mayor, city manager, and GM and city attorney went before the Joint Legislative Audit Committee as a result of audit findings. Big concern was debt. Big concern was, controls that are in place and possibly overspending, size of the GFT, going from GRU to the city of Gainesville, and those things. Another part of that discussion was the Oris contract for solar, with the implication or that it was implied that it's biomass 2.0 kind of thing. So what we did was, and the city commission basically instructed the general manager. Let me back up before I say that. It was advised to not sign that contract after that meeting without a reaffirming of the city commission to go forward. Many discussions behind closed doors, basically no one was comfortable with signing it anymore without JLAC approval, right? So what we did was it went back before the board a week after JLAC. Talked to a few city commissioners before that, almost all of them. And basically all of them were kind of on the fence at that point whether they would approve it or not. So basically, instead of making them vote on it, we came up with an option and presented it to them, and they accepted it, which is basically extend that program or extend that window for 6 weeks. We have the
Kick it
same
down the road.
recommendations. The project is still viable, the financial is still there, it still makes sense to do. But it gives 6 weeks to basically get more feedback and meet with JLAC members and the local delegation. So we are, Tony and I are in Tallahassee on Friday. We will be in Tallahassee again next Tuesday and Wednesday, meeting with the local delegation for Alachua County, as well as JLAC senators and representatives. And the goal there, among a couple of other things, is to talk about the Oris contract. Tell them why it's not biomass 2.0, and basically kind of get their feedback on thumbs up, thumbs down. And this is really for city commissioners to have a warm and fuzzy about whether going forward with the contract is it's seen as an act of defiance to JLAC, or whether it is something that's still within their purview with all the governance things going on, so.
So Eric,
On April 20th, we're gonna bring that back to them. Basically give them the results of the discussions that we had. We're gonna make the same recommendation for them. And they're gonna have to vote up or vote down. We basically told them, it's your decision. We told you everything we got to tell you, so
right,
it's your decision whether to go forward or not.
And
And
this,
that will happen on the 20th.
this committee does meet on April 17th. So there is another opportunity to talk about this before that city meeting.
By which point we'll know more about the state's
That might be, yeah.
engagement with the situation.
You'll see an updated bill, but you won't know what happens until the beginning of May.
so it seems like the issue first of all, is there data that shows that this generating the solar would be less expensive than the way we're generating power right now?
So, yes, we've done financial models that show that.
Yeah, so now we're moving from a analytical thing to a political thing. And it seems like the city commission doesn't want to upset Tallahassee. They want to make sure that they're in line with, that's what
The
yeah.
Tallahassee
Yeah.
doesn't request therefore some other engagement.
Right, therefore, and then Tallahassee wouldn't do something else.
So can we discuss this in April?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Do we
move
need
this
to-
To April.
Because we'll know more.
Seems like-
These are,
Right. I mean, our goal, of course, with our committee would be always pro-solar,
Right.
and
Right.
especially pro-solar if it's generating, it costs less costly than generating with natural gas.
yeah,
Is a
Yeah.
is a recommendation from us that is a statement of some kind in support of the contract more valuable to you now or more valuable to you April 17th? Does it make any difference?
Is it valuable at all?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly.
We're still gonna do it, whether it's valuable or at all. I mean, there are.
From GRU's standpoint, our recommendation has not changed. It is
Right.
really, the recommendation was the same the first time, it will be the same on April 20th, I can tell you exactly what it's.
Yeah, but if we say we support the recommendation at this point, is that better than we say we support the recommendation in the middle of April?
It could lend some weight to it, it could lend some weight to it.
Well, if we all support it, can we make that motion?
Yeah,
Yeah, and we're supporting it to the commission, not to
Right,
GRU.
right, yeah,
yes.
This
It
is
would
a support recommendation to the county and city commissioners.
yes.
Right.
Obviously, we have to have discussion if a motion is made, but my sense of it is that it makes sense to get in the open, straightforward, and say what it is we think works. What we think is best now, rather than to wait.
Yeah, I mean.
entire strategy
We're
of the
gonna do it
legal-
now. We're gonna make a recommendation now. Somebody make a motion. I
Yeah, sure, I'll
can't-
move to recommend this solar project to the commissioners.
I'll second the motion.
Right, been moved in second. Any other discussion on this motion? Any discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor? Moving forward.
Wait, see if Roberta needs to give a. She's the only person in. Oh, I'm sorry, you moved. I looked here and I didn't see. I'm sorry.
All right, so,
I really appreciate, yeah, your support of this project. We really need to get this done, but I understand the city is under a lot of pressure. So thank you for your recommendation.
okay. All right, been moved second and discussed. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, anyone against? Abstentions? All right, so we'll make that recommendation.
And John is gonna give updates to the Joint Water and Climate Policy Board at their next meeting on April 3rd. We can add that to the presentation so that they see that motion.
Okay.
That'll be easier than a letter.
Right. And more straightforward. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on,
We have staff updates,
I don't-
bullet ABC, 8 ABC.
Okay, I'll go first then. I mentioned this before, the Joint Water and Climate Policy Board meets on April 3rd, which is a Monday at 1:30. On the agenda, in addition to John giving an update from this committee, what he'll do is he'll go over everything, the motions that have been made by this committee since December. That includes the causal idea, as well as the letter we sent on the natural gas rebates, that'll be mentioned. And any other items of significance that we've supported or objected to in the last 4 months. So we'll have that update. It's basically an ongoing thing. John can do updates at each meeting they've had. They are gonna be electing a new outlying city representative. So as of now, they just have the three City of Gainesville, 3 commission. They're lacking the additional what I call the small city representative. So we've requested applicants from the cities for that. So hopefully we've gotten a few and we'll be selecting those as well. We will be getting a presentation on the vulnerability analysis from the information we have currently from Jones Edmonds, so they'll be presenting that. I've not seen that, but that'll be the first one they've had. And then the city, and I don't think you may not know about this, but the city got a grant, resiliency grant, for some vulnerability analysis, I think on the stormwater systems that they're also going to be talking about as well. It ties in with our work. So those are the items that are on for that agenda. That's all I have, unless Betsy, you wanted to add anything more? Okay. I don't think Dan, well, I know Dan Zoo isn't on and so we don't have a city person, but I know Eric, you probably have a couple of things you wanted to update everyone on.
A couple of things. For integrated resource plan, so we are kicking that process off. Stephen should have received an email today for this committee asking for a representative to be a part of that stakeholder group. I believe Betsy, you should have received an email today. Perfect. Asking for representation to that group. And so I think the deadline is the 31st to apply to that. And we'll be sending out meeting invites and so forth and try to talk about the schedule during that first meeting. But the idea is that the person or the representative would be a conduit of information, bringing information from their group to the stakeholder advisory group, and then also back from any of the information from the IRP, facilitating that discussion. And so that, I believe the first meeting is April 23rd, I want to say, don't quote me on that. But it's middle to end of April. And then we have 4 or 5 other meetings throughout the rest of the year with the idea of final IRP coming back in January of 2024.
So Eric, so I understand, are you asking the board, should they select a representative, or first of all, they determine they're willing, and then if they would like a representative to choose one?
Yes.
Because remember, due to our sunshine law, only one person can be on there, and also they need to see who's represented, because we also have to be careful about sunshine laws between committees.
Correct.
Yeah, that are on the same committee.
So once we start to get some of those responses back, then we can provide some who's going to be on that.
So would it be helpful to have a primary and an alternate? Would that be something that maybe the committee be willing to consider?
Yeah.
Okay.
We would ask only, well, this group is not, it doesn't apply because you only send one person.
Right, we're only sending one. The alternate would only go
If the primary.
if the primary has a conflict. Yeah.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Because this really is predicated on ongoing education and discussion, and they'll be talking about different parts of the IRP as it comes out. So if they miss pieces and parts in the beginning, it's going to be very hard to really pick up at the end to know, what's going on and where that feedback comes from. So would ask for that, but we do want you to be involved. As Betsy said, we sent it out to a whole, group of people in the community, a bunch of different groups in the community. And hoping to get some representation from all of those, so.
And remind us the frequency, what of meeting you told us last month and I,
So originally it was like every other month.
right,
When we get towards the summer, it becomes like once a month, for 2 or 3 meetings, and then it spreads back out.
okay.
And the reason it kind of condenses is because that becomes the meat of the technical analysis. And as those constraints, the inputs and the options come out, we want to be discussing those kind of in real time, because that input will affect how the models play out from there. Okay, so first couple of meetings, I think, is every other month. Middle, end of summer, it's like once a month for 2 or 3 meetings, and then it spreads back out.
So the application period for this ends at the end of this month, so we kind of need to decide somebody.
That's what I
Tonight.
was trying to, yeah. So it says here April 2023 through January of 2024, about 90-minute meetings.
Right.
That's the length of each, the meeting.
They will be during the day, during lunchtime. We will feed you lunch. Find that people stay longer when they're well fed and they actually listen. So, but we will try to stick to the hour and a half.
Only if there's coffee.
We can make some coffee.
No,
Well,
I would
curious.
be interested, but I don't know that I'll be here to the end of the year, so I shouldn't be.
Yeah, I've done some of these, with my utility. Yeah, I would go ahead and,
I would nominate John.
and
If
then,
you're open to it.
and let's get an alternate.
I was thinking, I'd love to do it. But I was thinking about the schedule, because it sounds like you'll be April and then end of June, probably.
I'm gonna tell you the dates right now.
Okay, yeah, if you have the dates, that would be perfect.
We'll be talking about the rest of the dates in the first meeting.
Okay.
But I'll tell you that right now. Okay, so the first meeting is April 20th. The second meeting is June 6th. The third is July 13th. The fourth is September 7th. The fifth meeting is December 19th. And that is the last one for the stakeholder group.
Mhm.
And then we have a couple other community outreach events too that are planned outside of that. But that group doesn't have to attend those. It's open to the general public.
You have dates for those as well? Sorry.
They've been tentatively scheduled right now, April 25th, July 27th, and January 11th. Of 2024, of course.
Thank you.
Okay,
Said it was new.
Like
12:30,
11:30, something like that.
and how long you think they last?
90 minutes.
90 minutes, you did, yeah, did say that. Okay. Now, what do you want from the stakeholders group? It's kind of sounds like you're presenting information.
So here's what we're doing. Meeting number 1 is we're going through the net zero policy. What is an IRP? Why are we doing it now? Glossary of terms, and then we're going over your engagement and participation in the process. The second meeting is the variables. In other words, what kind of things can we change in the model that would impact the output? So supply side, demand side, fuel prices, loads, economic parameters, and base cost variables, load forecasts, existing resources, supply side options, all those things. Second meeting. It kind of ramps up pretty quick after that. Third meeting is variables and sensitivity. So high and low load forecast, existing resources, projected capacity requirements, what are we going to need into the future? Supply side options, in other words, what are the things on the table that we could build to meet that load requirement? And then economic parameters. The fourth meeting in September is preliminary modeling result. So we talked about the inputs, we talked about the constraints, we talked about what an IRP is. We go off, we run the model, and then we come back and say, here's the model results.
Right.
Here's preliminary results. Give us your feedback. you have this education up to this point now, what looks off, what do we need to look at again? And then the last one, in December is refining the base case and also the sensitivities. And that one, we're probably talking about a recommendation that would go back to the city commission.
When you're building the model, are you only building the one model, or is it possible to build models to compare? Because obviously.
That's the point, is to compare. So you would build a base case, and then you would build sensitivities and scenarios that you would compare to that base case.
And what you're doing is the same thing that you do all the time. This is the format that you use, all the time.
So one big question on the economic variables, I don't know if there's any discussion, but it might need to be something that's included. But is that the social cost of carbon that changes the model can change the model dramatically? Will that be one of the cases you look at?
So haven't defined that quite yet. The social cost of carbon, we have to scope that out. And what does that mean? What is that scope?
There's a federal social cost of carbon and then a recommended social cost of carbon that is much higher. That at one point could become law.
So in the past, what we've typically done is we've done things like, or the cost of carbon credits or carbon offsets. That's a driver in the model that penalizes the use of carbon, correct? And so will it be called a carbon impact? I don't know, but we will be looking at, one of the base cases is the study of net zero and making sure that that scenario meets that.
Right. I think since that's the goal, is to meet that net zero obligation, you have to include the cost of carbon because it's going to increase over time. And so accounting for it earlier on when it's cheaper, saves us money in the long term. So that's something I hope to see.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, I see this more as receiving information so that we understand how the process works.
The idea is to bring that back, yeah. And
bring that information back. So that we understand the process, because your process is kind of set.
He has a process, yes, but he needs community feedback and feedback from these respective groups. It's a two-way, it's not just a receiving information. My understanding.
Yeah, what can these groups impact?
These groups can impact what is included as far as options. They can impact some of the constraints that get folded into these, right? And it's important to note that it is an advisory group. We're not going to come back to the group and say, you must approve what's going forward, right? That comes back from the technical consultants and so forth.
Right.
But you can, when we talk about these constraints, when we talk about the cost, when we talk about the options, there's an opportunity in there, and that's why they're included timely in there to say, no, we really need to look at these options. Well, we can go back and we have time at that point to fold them into the scenarios and give you a cost compare coming out of the end of what those options are. So there is an opportunity, and that's the point. But we found that, through our consultant and doing this other places. And by the way, I won't say all, most utilities do IRPs. This is not a new process. This isn't something that we've made up, right? The process is what it is.
The process is what it is.
What it is. That's how you do it. But being able to pull the community in at a level of understanding where they know the impact and be able to provide input to that is what we're going for. Recognizing that most people don't do an IRP every day. They don't know what it is for the most part. So we got to bring them up to that level to be able to bring educated feedback to it, right?
Okay. Oh, I think it's good. I know that some of the groups that you're including or make sense. I know the school district's included. They're a big customer. you got your hospital district in there somewhere?
We've got hospital, we've got education, we've got community groups, we've got faith-based organizations, we've got affordable housing. The chief climate officer from Gainesville, Dr. Zhu, is included. Their affordable housing director is included. And so there's what we tried to do was get a wide plethora of representation, large customers, small minority-owned businesses, and kind of everything in between. UF and Santa Fe are all included in there as well, so
Okay,
that's the goal. That's included from the sustainability portion from the county, so we're really trying to get a wide swath here.
all right. Okay, any other
Do we have a
questions?
Motion
Uh,
for a representative from the group, it's John.
I was moving to vote for John
Did
as
we
a
make two
as a
motions?
liaison,
Do we make
the
two
primary
motions?
liaison,
Do we need to make two
You need
motions?
an alternate.
or the alternate, two motions.
Okay.
Separate motions, I think.
I second the motion that John be our principal liaison. You did want this, yes.
You want, oh, yeah, I know. Yeah.
Now it's time for
Yeah.
discussion, John.
let's, it's been moved in second, discussion.
Are you comfortable with this
Yeah, and
and the dates?
the
are
dates and
good for you?
and so we'll move to our alternate, so dates that,
Okay,
I haven't looked at my calendar, but, overall, it looks good. And then we'll, make sure we get a good alternate too. All right, so all in favor?
I-
Aye,
All
Thank
right,
you.
against,
thank you, John.
all right. Abstain. Okay, so now let's make a, motion for our alternate.
So just be clear, the alternate will go if it turns out John has a conflict, not just replacing him on certain meetings. It's, you're all in or not,
Or not.
so.
Right.
If it turns out when you attend, all of a sudden you realize, wow, I have either some type of conflict or a time commitment issue, then it would turn to the alternate.
Right,
Yeah, and I've got conflicts on 3 of the dates already. So I would not be a good alternate.
Adam, were you potentially willing?
don't think I'll be here through the whole process.
I unfortunately have other commitments that I can't get out.
So there are a couple of members of the committee that aren't here.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Maybe we can revisit this, to look for an alternate when we have everyone here.
Well,
The first meeting is April 20th,
We have our primary.
3 days after.
Can the primary make the,
Oh, yes.
The first
you're right,
meeting.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're good. For the
Yeah,
intent, we
yeah.
met it.
Yeah.
The alternate was just a contingency fund. That was
okay,
really-
we'll try to.
get a bigger?
James, you got.
I'm pretty overextended.
right. Based on the remaining 4 members, 2 of them are leaving. We already know that. Well, we knew one was,
One
and
is.
apparently another one is. Carly's gonna have to leave as well. So that leaves, Jackie.
Should be interesting.
Yeah, I think she would be.
Yeah, so who's the,
So,
who am I missing?
Danielle.
Oh,
but
Nathan.
she's- oh,
Nathan.
So
Yeah,
it's Nathan. So I could, if you guys are comfortable, I can inquire with Nathan and Jackie to see if they have an interest, and if one of them does, you make them the alternate.
okay,
Does that require a formal motion for you to make that inquiry?
or to appoint the
I
alternate.
mean, we could. Why don't we do this? Why don't you can make a motion that if one of those 2 are available, they can be the alternate. How does that sound?
I make a motion that if one of the 2 of the remaining members of the committee that you have mentioned is available and interested, that we appoint her or him to that position.
I second.
All in favor?
All right, all in, any discussion on that?
So there's a possibility we may not have it.
All right, so all in favor of Steve's motion?
I,
Terry's motion. Any against, sustained? So we'll go ahead and
Okay.
give you that action item,
Okay.
Steve.
Yep.
All right, moving on.
Do you have any else?
I got two more quick
Oh,
things.
okay,
So we are working with a lot of grants or looking at and evaluating a lot of grants. One thing we are heavily pursuing is the grid resiliency and improvement grant. And we will be looking to work with a few of the community groups to help support that, kind of starting a partnership with that. And so some of the same groups that would be represented in the IRP and the stakeholder advisory group may be involved in that as well. And the idea is really just to show community support for GRU grants and also GRU support in the activity they have in grants as well. So kind of a community partnership in that way. And the last thing is we had an electric vehicle steering committee meeting today. I put together a charter for a group that includes 3 folks, including myself, from sustainability and GRU, the chief climate officer, the chief transportation officer from the city, as well as the fleet manager, to come up with an electric vehicle plan for the city of Gainesville as a whole, transition to hybrid and EV vehicles for light duty vehicles in our fleet. As well as any ideas that are available to incentivize customer use and transition and education to EVs. So we had our first meeting today. Have not set all the goals yet, but we know that that's where we want to go. But just another thing that we're picking up and trying to run with and get some traction on for transition to net zero.
Very good.
That's it.
Thank you.
great.
thank you.
Eric, real quick, you've probably done this, but if you haven't, Gerald Bailey is the county's fleet manager and has done a lot of analysis for that electric. He's begun to integrate electric vehicles into some of the county fleet that got hybrids in early and actually contributed to the energy element of the comp plan by looking at our fuels analysis, identifying that hauling waste to the landfill was our biggest, intractable fuel cost and carbon emission. But anyway, so he's done a lot of analysis. I can help you get in touch with him.
That'd be great.
Actually, wait a minute. G Bailey at electriccounty.us. But I'll be glad to do a little intro email if you want to.
That would be great.
Okay.
Wow. That's your biggest fuel?
It's just mass, right? Again, we're back to physics.
Right, semis carried them.
850 tons.
A day.
Are they gonna buy
Two
Tesla
vehicles a day, twice a
trucks
day.
for hauling waste?
Let's hope not.
Wow.
Or
Wow.
EV, I shouldn't,
Okay,
not saying.
all right,
it's
Eric,
different.
thank you.
SpaceX rocket.
So so we can get out of here. Number 9, suggested items for our next regular meeting. So we have, Steve, you wanna
Yeah,
kind of go
these,
through those?
these have been kind of sitting on the agenda, getting pushed to the next one each time. I don't know if any of these are ready to go. There was the civic engagement one, which I think is still kind of out there. The CWC rebuilding together presentation. Don't know if that would be ready as well.
Specific to the Empower grant or another,
I think it was
because they gave one.
another, because we did the
Okay.
Empower grant. already.
Yeah, okay.
And it was the ARPA energy efficiency weatherization program.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say that that one, we just had a meeting, we got one more delay because legal has one more page, contract page written together, so we don't have any process to start for that program quite yet.
I mean, one thing is that we could have a discussion about Origis again. I'll put that on there. We don't just, I mean, we made a motion, but it might be something of discussion.
Depending on what
Wouldn't be a
happens.
big item, probably, but we can bring that back. If there's anything else we want to add, obviously, I think the climate event planning would be something we'd want to keep back on there since we're now only about, at that point, we're just over a month from that happening, so that the next one would probably be a pretty big, maybe, I think Betsy and I could probably be ready to lay out kind of an action strategy of what's left to do. And I'm sure we could use that help in that arena. So that would be something I think we could make as a major focus of our next meeting.
Okay, I agree. I would,
Any other suggestions? I know at times we've overloaded our agendas, so I
Right.
don't want to do that.
and we probably want to do some kind of summary of where we are with the Tallahassee group. What they come up with.
Just to note with the CWC, if anyone's interested, they have their training coming up, to become an energy coach. And starts, I can send out the information.
That would be great.
But it's a 3-day training, March 22nd, March 29th, and April 1st. 2 of them are in the evenings and 1 is on a weekend, so you can get some hands-on practice. So that'll actually give you a pretty good understanding if you're able to attend of what they do.
Yeah. All right, all right, we're gonna do a recap.
Okay, from the last to the beginning, so I think Adam just volunteered to send information to CWC, to Stephen. John has a meeting with the Joint Water Climate Policy Board on April 3rd. You're gonna be adding to that presentation, this most recent recommendation to change policy 1.25. Stephen was going to send out an email to Jackie and Nathan to see if they were interested. Let's see. I think, Stephen, your group is gonna work on a letter of introduction, so that when we contact these community groups, we have a sound like a standardized format to approach them. Then, yeah, so we were asked to make our contacts by April 7th. Is that correct?
Yes.
To finish making those contacts with the organizations that we were listed. Terry volunteered to contact
A couple of others. I'll.
Some other organizations.
I'll alert Stephen.
And then Stephen, you said you were gonna have a flyer as well by April 7th. And then I guess the last thing to mention is that you were in the process of developing a website / sign up form for organizations to state how they want to show up to the event. That's what.
Okay, any other items that we want to mention that James might have left out? Okay. All right. Hearing none, let's move to our public comment, Steve.
So, Roberta, if you're interested in any public comment at this point, you are welcome to raise your hand. I believe I've unmuted you. Go ahead.
Hi there. Yeah, I just want to thank all of you for spending your time on this committee and working so hard on it. And thank John again for joining another committee. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Roberta. You set a good example. Okay. Nothing else. I'm calling this meeting adjourned.